Imagine an average day in your life. Waking up every day, that same routine. Going to work, scrolling endlessly through your phones, paying your bills, making plans about the future, and repeating the same again and again. Trying to fit into a system that doesn't care so much for you. And then realizing that one day you will all die, and eventually almost everyone will forget you. But if that is true, then what is the point of living? And this is a very unsettling question. Albert Camus asked this question in The Myth of Sisyphus. Now, the interesting aspect here is that if we go back to what is this whole idea of Sisyphus, who is Sisyphus?
The gods condemned Sisyphus to ceaselessly roll a massive boulder to the top of a mountain, only for it to fall back again.
Hi everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. This has been a very interesting time for the country where the convention is no longer being accepted with conviction. Everything that we're holding dear, accepting without questioning, is being challenged, and answers being asked from people in power so that man on the ground will no longer be neglected. It is not the first time this is being questioned. What I'm going to delve into today is not so much of a political concept, but more of a philosophical concept. I'll be talking about a very interesting essay by one of the famous philosophical novelists, writers, or essayists of the 20th century, Albert Camus. Now, imagine waking up in an average day in your life. You wake up and scrolling endlessly through your phones, socializing with your friends, going to your work, fitting into a schedule, planning for tomorrow, planning for the next few days, planning for next few years, setting yourself and fitting into a system, constantly grinding yourself, pushing yourself and pushing yourself to do the same things again and again. Sometimes you get rewarded for it, but more often than not, you are not getting what you think you deserve, but you don't have an escape. You are in a trap, the trap of an inescapable cycle, the trap of this vicious cycle. And you would one day ask yourself, if I'm repeating the same task again and again, then what is the point of living? And this is a very unsettling question. Albert Camus asked this question in The Myth of Sisyphus. Now, the myth of Sisyphus comes from the concept of Homer, one of the famous historians, Greek historians, Homer, who is the author of Iliad and Odyssey. And Odyssey is a movie that you must be talking about these days. You must have heard, or many of you might have seen it. So, we are talking about Myth of Sisyphus by Albert Camus. And it is not a book that so much leaves you with despair, but rather one of the most liberating ideas that of the 20th century. Now, Myth of Sisyphus is actually a philosophical essay, and it is considered as one of the most popular philosophical essays. What is the essential concept of the book? It is the notion of the absurd. And there are some concepts of existentialism and nihilism. If you're a student of literature, if you have delved, or a student of philosophy, if you have delved into this concept, then it will be a very interesting read for you. And if not, then also it is going to be a very interesting read for you if you're exploring the various possibilities or challenges of life, what lies ahead, how far you have come, and what you are going to do in the coming years. Now, one can best describe this as an endless conflict, the conflict between a human tendency to seek inherent value and the meaning of life, and the inability to find any of this in a rather purposeless, meaningless, and irrational universe. The unreasonable silence of the universe in response to our routine questions is strikingly absurd. The point is, neither the universe nor the human mind is inherently absurd. It is the relationship, the absurdity emerges from a contradiction between humanity's longing for a meaning and and the universe's unreasonable silence and the universe's indifference to give a meaning. Imagine we expect universe to give us a meaningful answers to everything, but universe mostly works in a very random manner. The world around us mostly works in a random manner, and this is such an interesting concept that is being explored by this book, The Myth of Sisyphus. Now, the interesting aspect here is that if we go back to what is this whole idea of Sisyphus, who is Sisyphus? The Greek gods have condemned Sisyphus to ceaselessly rolling a rock to the top of a mountain, which again from that position falls back to the bottom of the mountain, and he has to again start a fresh morning, pushing that rock or pushing that huge boulder up to the top of the mountain.
The gods condemned Sisyphus to ceaselessly roll a massive boulder to the top of a mountain, only for it to fall back again.
Sometimes it may seem as a dreadful punishment, futile and hopeless labor. Now, who was Sisyphus? Sisyphus was a very interesting character. He has been considered as one of the most cunning men in the history of Greek history or Greek literature or Greek mythology. What did he do to invite the scorn of the gods?
Sisyphus was no ordinary man. Clever, rebellious, and defiant, he repeatedly challenged the gods.
He had stolen and traded certain divine secrets. He knew that the god Jupiter had adopted Athena, who was the daughter of Sisyphus. So he told Sisyphus about the abduction, but that was not without exchange for anything. Actually, in exchange, he had asked water supply for the city of Corinth, and he had trapped death. Homer tells us that Sisyphus managed to put death in chains, and this meant no one could die, and this emptied Pluto's underworld until War of God had to intervene and free death itself. Now Sisyphus has put death in chains itself, and then of course he had tricked his way out of the underworld uh, when the time for him to die had come. He had tricked death itself. He had tricked his way out of the underworld.
He tricked his way out of the underworld. Once back on Earth, he saw the sun, the ocean, and the beauty of the world, and refused to return.
Knowing that he was going to die, he actually secretly ordered his wife to leave his body unburied. Once in the underworld, he complained to the gods, complained to Pluto especially, about his wife's disobedience and convinced Pluto to let him return to Earth briefly to punish her. He refused to go back. Once Sisyphus was back on Earth and saw the sun, the ocean, the beauty of the world, he ignored the gods' warnings and simply refused to return to the underworld. And he no longer wanted to go back to the infernal darkness. No matter how many recalls were there, signs of anger, warnings were of no avail. He just didn't listen to the gods, and many years passed like that. Finally, the gods lost patience. After he had lived for many more years, he was pulled back. Mercury was sent to forcibly drag him back to underworld, where his rock was waiting for him for his ultimate or as his ultimate punishment. And condemned by the gods for his defiance, now he has to endlessly push a massive rock up a mountain, only to find that it will fall back, roll back each time he reaches the summit of the mountain.
The gods condemned Sisyphus to ceaselessly roll a massive boulder to the top of a mountain, only for it to fall back again.
And then Sisyphus repeats this task forever. His labor is so painful, repetitive, and it's often seemingly without any purpose. There is nothing he can do to change his fate, just like most of us cannot do to change much of our fate without will. For Camus, Sisyphus becomes an absurd hero, a man who loves life, hates death, and is condemned to a meaningless, purposeless labor. Isn't this true of so many human beings in this world? You would have already grasped that Sisyphus is an absurd hero. He is as much through his passions and as much through his passions as through his torture. His scorn of the gods, his hatred of death, his passion for life, his unspeakable penalty, which is being exerted upon him, and his task of repeating the same task again and again without accomplishing anything in the underworld. This is the price that must be paid for the passions on earth. The powerful image is an allegory for the man's condition in present day world. Like Sisyphus, we spend our lives pushing our own boulders, pushing our own goals, pursuing our own goals, becoming a part of a system that doesn't care for so much for us as we do it for the system. Because the moment we do not fit into the system will forget us and will get it replaced, get us replaced by any number of human beings. They hardly care what goes through or an individual who considers a system so important for himself or herself. What truly makes existence absurd is not the label itself, but we are aware of it even then we are a part of it. Yet Camus doesn't invite despair. Instead, he imagines Sisyphus walking back down the mountain after the rock has fallen, fully conscious of his fate. Sisyphus is fully conscious of his fate. He is not worried about what life or what the underworld has pushed him into.
Sisyphus becomes the absurd hero, not because he escapes his fate, but because he understands it and continues.
It is during that return, while Sisyphus is walking down that cliff, walking down that slope, Sisyphus interests me. Camus says, "A face that toils so close to stones is already stone itself." And in that moment of awareness, he becomes superior to his fate and stronger than his rock. He is no longer merely a prisoner of destiny, but a rebel and against it. Ultimately, the myth of Sisyphus addresses the immense question of life's meaning without appealing to metaphysics. Rather than offering a final answer, Camus examines a state of mind that every human being encounters sooner or later, the experience of absurdity, and asks how we might nevertheless live well and find happiness. His closing words remain among the most memorable in modern philosophy. For if there is a sin against life, it consists perhaps not so much in despairing of life as in hoping for another life and in eluding the implacable danger of this life. Camus suggests that the greatest betrayal of life is not despair. Rather, it is refusing to fully engage with the life we have because we are so preoccupied with another one, whether that remains heaven, reincarnation, or some sort of future existence, or some sort of promised life we watch around us. And that ultimately puts us into a space where we are not fully engaged with the life we have been entrusted with or life we have been blessed with, because we are all the time preoccupied with imagining something else, something better, something imaginary, something mm, dreamy and non-existence, yet that has preoccupied our minds all the time. The myth of Sisyphus also explores the value of life in a world which is devoid of a religious certainty and can be seen as Camus' response to thinkers such as Dostoevsky and Kierkegaard, some of the famous philosophers or philosophical authors. Dostoevsky is, of course, a very common name on the Russian authors who explores into different challenging concepts of humanity and existence in difficult times. And Camus describes himself as sin without God, yet he doesn't consider himself an atheist. He states that I do not believe in God and I am not an atheist. This is a concept of Camus which interests me a lot. This reflects the very nature of the absurd. Human beings cannot prove the existence of God, but they cannot prove conclusively that God is not existence as well. So it's a very absurd concept. You cannot prove the existence, you cannot disprove the existence. Even in our daily struggles, which appear repetitive and absurd, we give them a meaning by embracing them as our own. This is how Camus ends the myth of Sisyphus by asking us to imagine. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. One must imagine Sisyphus happy, not because his burden has disappeared, but because he has chosen to own it. And he says that I live Sisyphus at the foot of the mountain. One always finds one's burden again. I live Sisyphus at the foot of the mountain. One always finds one's burden again, meaning life struggles never end. Like Sisyphus, we must repeatedly face our own burdens.
Sisyphus becomes the absurd hero, not because he escapes his fate, but because he understands it and continues.
And as Camus concludes, the struggle itself towards the height is enough to fill a man's heart. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. So, with that, I conclude this particular book or the essay review. But I know it's a very short review. It only reveals that the last line is very interesting. The struggle itself towards the height is enough to fill a man's heart. One must imagine Sisyphus happy.
One must imagine Sisyphus happy.
One must imagine Sisyphus happy, for the struggle alone is enough to fill his heart.
As we often say, success is a matter of the journey itself. It's not just the destination. So every moment of life one has to enjoy, because destination is just a point of time. If a mountaineer is looking at climbing cliff after one cliff after another, when he reaches the summit he thinks of reaching another one, but it's the journey to the summit that sums of his entire struggle, that sums of his existence, because the summit is just a point of time, but it's the journey to the summit that defines a man. It's a journey to the top, it's a journey to the destination. It's that journey which may feel repetitive, which may feel rewardless, but it is that journey that ultimately decides the nature of summit, the nature of reward a person is going to get. Ultimately, it's the age old concept. If we have to work and work without too much of concern for the results, of course, results are important, but our work should not get compromised consistently by concern about the results. It's the work that matters, or maybe in a very absurd, in a very nihilistic way, this myth of Sisyphus might still inspire us when the author says that one must imagine Sisyphus happy, because life's struggles never end, and we must face our burdens, we must own them, and we must enjoy every moment of our journey towards the summit. With that, I end here. But do watch for more exciting reviews in my next presentation. Albert Camus is a great author. I'll come up with something very nice from Albert Camus before I go to other authors who deal with absurd, or the concept of absurdity and existentialism. His book The Outsider is one very interesting book. There are other books of Albert Camus. Then there are, of course, Franz Kafka's Metamorphosis. I'm kind of these days looking into these books which deal with absurdity, existentialism, and Kierkegaard's books are there. Dostoevsky's some of the books are there, and of course, later on we have books by Milan Kundera, which are philosophical, political absurdity, deal with the Central Europe in the 1960s and 70s. I'll come up a review of all those books one after another. But as of now, this much. Thank you. Take care.